Welcome to Calaveras Behind the Badge, where our commitment to community engagement, transparency, and open dialogue takes center stage. I'm Greg Stark, Lieutenant with the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office, Public Information Officer, and your host as we explore the challenges we face and the role of law enforcement in Calaveras County. So whether you're tuning in on your morning commute, at home, or on a hike through our beautiful county, we're glad to have you. Let's get started. Today's episode, we're diving into a day in the life of a Calaveras County deputy. With me today is Calaveras Deputy Joseph Denny.
Thank you for having me.
It's glad to have you here. And you know, this is part of our continuing podcast series where we're going down the list of survey requests from our listeners, and rather high on the list of, you know, what does a deputy do in Calaveras County compared to other counties or, you know, municipal areas,
Sure.
you know, public police departments, whatnot. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, your experiences, what you go through today, your preparation, what you do in between shifts, in between calls, things of that nature. So before we get started, it's important for the listeners to find out who they're talking to or who they're listening to.
Yep.
So go ahead and share a little bit about yourself.
Again, my name is Joseph Denny. I've been working for Calaveras County Sheriff's Office for a year and a half now. Enjoyed my time ever since I've started.
So a year and a half on the job. Let's talk a little bit about your background, as much as you're comfortable sharing. Maybe a little bit about your early life. You know, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Calaveras?
No, well, I was on and off coming up here as a kid, but I mainly grew up in Monterey County, little town, Marina, beach town right outside Monterey.
So exactly like Calaveras, a beach town.
Yeah.
You know.
Total polar opposite, that's for sure. But coming up here as a kid, always preferred it up here. And when my family's made that decision to finally move up here, I decided to tag along with them.
So you came up vacations mostly when you were younger?
Yeah, for the most part, mainly to visit the grandparents and whatnot.
So is this your first job in law enforcement?
Yes.
What'd you do prior?
I worked in an HVAC business through my dad.
Okay. Installation, repairs, that kind of thing?
Yeah, installing ductwork, installing heaters, ACs, stuff like that. Mainly helped him more with heavy lifting. He was more of the brains of the operation.
All right. And then what about any education? You graduated high school, obviously.
Yeah. After high school, I went to college and got my bachelor's degree in communications from California State University of Monterey Bay.
So communications, that's something that, you know, law enforcement does pretty much every single call.
Yep.
Have you been able to draw upon your formal education to help with, you know, your progress in your law enforcement?
I would say so. It's definitely benefited me a lot in the aspect of being able to communicate with people, just the theories that they teach us within schooling and whatnot of how to properly approach someone and go about it, just depending on like their speech patterns and whatnot. So I found it pretty useful. Originally, I was doing a criminal justice, but was always told by other people I knew in law enforcement that communications was a better way to go. So
yeah, it's not uncommon for, you know, people in law enforcement or want to be in law enforcement. They think that I should get a, you know, criminal justice degree, which certainly helps. But having another degree, you know, whether it be, you know, communication, political science, something along those lines, you know, psychology, something to help develop other parts of your knowledge base. Because, you know, certainly going through the academy and, you know, on the job training, you're going to get the criminal justice side. So having you know, deputies with a well-rounded perspective on, you know, education and interactions with people is really key to helping, you know, getting the community to understand what we're trying to do. And, you know, every call we go on, you know, that you, like I said before, you're talking, you're communicating, verbal, nonverbal, that whole 9 yards. So good job getting that degree. What do you do when you're not working? What are your off-duty hobbies?
I like to go hunting, like to go fishing, mainly like to just be outdoors. It's the main thing. Mountain biking. Don't do as much skateboarding anymore. Definitely can't afford to do that one, but mainly just any type of outdoor activity. Try to be outdoors, clear my mind a little bit. Yeah,
Calaveras is definitely the place to do that. We have, you know, as you know, and the listeners know, we have, you know, hunting, fishing, hiking. It's, you know, love to live where you work and, you know, working in an environment. It's, you know, it's really nice to have that, you're playing where you're working.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So you're working with your dad at HVAC over on the coast. Got some college underneath you. Yep. What drew you to law enforcement, or what caused you to pursue a career in law enforcement?
So actually, originally, it was going to be Air Force when I was growing up. That's all I wanted to do was fly fighter jets and whatnot. But then I hit a growth spurt, so that kind of went out of the question. Was in high school, though, and one of my buddies, he was going to the SRO, which is a school reserve officer at the time, and he was telling me about this program that the high school is offering called the Explore program. I believe Calaveras County has something similar through Marina PD, and it allows high school students to be able to go into a day-to-day life of an officer, go on ride-alongs, go do community events, and see the aspects of what a police officer does for a living. Mm-hmm. And ever since I started that in freshman year of high school, after my first ride-along, that's all I wanted to do. Like, I got hooked.
Yeah, you're right. We do have an Explorer program here. We are in the process of, adding people to that. So if anybody's listening to the program, of a young person that's interested in a law enforcement career, it's certainly an opportunity to, pull the curtain back, get to know exactly what a deputy does from day to day, and is that a career path that you want to pursue? So Explorer program. How long were you with them?
From my freshman year of high school to about second year of college, I'd say. Pretty much just did whatever I could when I was with the program, try to learn as much as possible. And I think it definitely helps a lot if you do plan on going to this career.
So which academy did you go to?
I went to San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton.
And you were sponsored by our department?
Correct.
So those don't understand that the sponsored is we, lack of a better term, we pre-hire the person contingent on their passing the academy. They go through a 26-week-ish academy.
About roughly, it adds up to 6 months, I think, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. And we pay them a salary to go through. We take care of all expenses, ammunition, PT gear, physical training gear, things of that nature. So you went through the academy. What'd you think?
I thought it was a good time.
Yeah.
I know there's definitely mixed opinions about it, but me personally, I had a pretty enjoyable time just being able to challenge myself and educate myself on something that I have passion about doing and about the career that I do.
Yeah, so being an explorer for so many years and then actually getting to go to the academy and start to put those wheels in motion for your future career is certainly exciting.
Yeah.
So you graduated from the academy, and then you went on to our field training program. Talk about that process.
It was definitely a change of pace, that's for sure. So in the academy, when you finally do get to scenarios, it's black and white. You either have yes or no. Mm-hmm. When you get out into the real world and you start FTO, you come to realize real quick that it's not that simple. You have to really dig deep into finding whether or not you have a crime. And if you have a crime, if you got all the elements for that crime and whatnot. So really understanding that there's more to it than just meets the eye with what the academy shows you was probably like the biggest eye-opener for it. But it was also really liberating too, just in the sense of being able to actually go out there and be a cop.
Finally getting to that, the end zone where you can actually go out and do things, which, a lot of people in the FTO program, their first real day of law enforcement when you have somebody with you the whole time. It's about a 6-month process in our office where three different phases, usually three different field training officers with we call a shadow week where the training officer is in plain clothes and you're basically, for all intents and purposes, making all the decisions, but you have that safety net. Once you get out on your own and you have no more safety net, nobody next to you for the answers to all your questions or, which element am I missing for this crime? Do I have the ability to arrest? That's a sobering experience for some people where it's just me now.
Yeah. Yeah, when I got to that point within Shadow Week, it was very liberating, very, I guess in the sense of, wow, I actually have gone to this point, like I'm on my own now. It was kind of weird. I got in the car waiting for my FTO, and I'm like, oh, wait, I don't have an FTO anymore. Okay, let's go out and go find something.
Yeah, I can turn on any radio station I want. I can turn the air conditioner on. I can have my window up. I can have my window down. It's your mobile office, if you will. So you graduated from the field training program. Are you on a special team? You're on special teams with us, right?
Yeah. So this last September, I actually just went to the school for crisis negotiations for our C&T team, which is a crisis negotiations team. And it's a branch off of SWAT. So whenever SWAT gets called out, C&T gets called out. And we're pretty much the people that talk and try to de-escalate whatever situation that we got going on before we have to make any other decision.
Yeah, so part of that crisis response unit, it's a standard punch-out role is when SWAT goes to either a planned or unplanned mission, your team or the C&T team also rolls with them. Just thinking about this now, it's no mystery that you majored in communication, and then you went into the one special team of our office that specializes in communication. So, again, how's that worked for you?
I definitely think it had hand in hand. I think it definitely helped with my interview process too, just telling them, hey, I got this background too. And just being able to understand different key factors. And then when I went to the school too for CNT, it was just even more of an eye-opener from what I learned in college of being able to add into people's behaviors and theories that pretty much help you be able to put the puzzle together on how can we get this person to de-escalate and start cooperating.
Like what communication tactic or style would fit this person best to get the best results.
Yep.
Nice. So we talked also a little bit that you wanted to be possibly an advisor for our Explorer team.
Yeah, I mean, just because of the fact I know that it at least worked personally for me. When I was an Explorer, I got really excited about the career. I wanted to learn as much as possible as a kid to now that I'm here. I want to be able to be that advisor that I had when I was growing up to inspire the next generation to be able to do their best and become future police officers.
It'd be that catalyst that pushes them forward. Yeah, we've had a few Explorers in our office come through, work their way up the ranks. An undersheriff right now was a longtime Explorer. We had others that came through as Explorers, moved on to other agencies, and they made it very high up in the food chain, if you will, for the command staff and other agencies, and certainly our agency. So West Point, you said you did or did not say your grandparents from the West Point area?
Yeah. So as a kid, I'd come up, like I said, up to the Calaveras County, and for the longest time, I thought West Point was Calaveras. That was it to it. Until I got into this job and realized, okay, the county's a lot bigger than I thought. But yeah, I got grandparents that live in the West Point area and always came up here as a kid and loved the area.
Nice. So you're off FTO.
Yep.
You've been here a year and a half. Let's go ahead and talk about what a typical day is for our deputies. So just to fill in, the listeners, our deputies work a 6 in the morning till 6 in the afternoon for day shift, and then 6 at night till 6 in the morning graveyard, with a 4-on, 4-off rotating schedule, which means every week they have a different day off, and it rotates through the week. That does a couple things. It allows our brand new deputies every 6 weeks, they have the ability to have part of or most of the weekend, which was basically unheard of with traditional staffing or traditional schedules. And it also affords us built-in hours for training at no cost to the county. So every month we have what we call a squad training, where we focus on specialized tactics or skills that we want the deputies to maintain proficiency in. De-escalation tactics, defensive tactics, driving, firearms, things like that. So you're assigned to day shift, correct?
Correct.
So walk us through your day as you get to the office.
So my day typically started at 4:30 in the morning. It's when I wake up, greet the day and whatnot. And I get to the office about 5:30. It's not too long of a drive time for me to get here. And pretty much I like to get here at least an hour or 30 minutes before my shift starts, just so that I know that I'm prepared for anything that may come my way, because my shift can start even before my 0600 start time. So I need to make sure that I'm ready, whether that be I have all my forms, whether that be my patrol vehicles are ready to go. I want to make sure that I have nothing missing. I'm ready to greet the day with whatever it has in store for me.
Yeah, our clients don't make appointments, so sometimes coming into work, or if you get to work early, sometimes you're often called to either in-progress calls or calls that need to be tended to because graveyard was either too busy, and vice versa. Graveyard might break from their briefing early to go help out. So briefing's at 6 o'clock.
Yep. Not
a second past.
Nope.
You're in the seat, pen in hand, ready to go.
That's
you guys
right.
handle your briefing. And what do you guys talk about during briefing?
Generally, we go over the calls for service. Let's say it's the beginning of the week for us. We'll go over what happened over our weekend and whatnot, see what cases were pulled, what we need to be looking into, different areas that we might need to be patrolling, cases we may need to follow up on. And then when it's usually midweek, let's say like our Tuesday or whatnot, usually we're just looking to see what happened the night before.
Yeah, knowing those trends that are happening, especially when you're off for 4 days or When we say off for 4 days, that typically doesn't happen. There's usually an overtime shift in there.
Yeah.
There's a court shift. There's something in there. If you're on C&T or the crisis negotiation team or another specialized team, there's additional training that goes in with that. So we say 4 days off, but that's absolute rarity. So you come in, you understand what happened the week before, maybe who or what areas are suffering from, some uptick in crimes. Go over the hotspot policing, which is a analytical approach to make sure we deploy our resources in a more strategic manner than randomly driving around on patrol. So you guys talk about all that in patrol?
Yep.
Do a little bit of maybe roll call training, if you will, or go over some new laws or new things going on. And then what?
Generally, we kind of do our talk about the weekend or week or anything like that and over laws. Usually we'll check in with each other, make sure we're all doing okay and whatnot. And usually once we're done with that, do a little bit of a powwow, then we go to, if we need to type reports or if we got a call on the board, we'll go and address it. Just pretty much start the day from right there.
So you mentioned getting your patrol vehicle ready. What does that entail?
So making sure my lights and sirens work. That's the big one because you can't be doing a traffic stop with no lights and sirens. So that's definitely a big one. Making sure all my gear's in there, whether that be rifle, shotgun, my go bag for C&T because I carry one on me because I can be deployed at any point. My standard patrol bag usually has all my forms, maps, anything that would be related to the job as me being a patrol deputy would be in there. A few other items here and there, AED, patrol cell phone. It's usually what's in my vehicle to make sure I'm ready.
And what type of vehicle are you driving?
Right now, a Ford Taurus.
So one of the sedans?
Yep.
And then what area? So again, for the listeners, our beats are broken up geographically. Generally, the Valley Springs area, generally the Copper area, generally part of Angels Camp. Where are you located? So
I'm usually located in the Charles Beat section of the county, which is Murphy's all the way up to Tamarack and Alpine County line. Definitely enjoy working up there.
It's hard to complain about your work environment when you're literally patrolling a scenic byway of California.
Yeah.
And then, depending on what type of, you obviously don't drive that patrol vehicle during the winter, but there's other concerns that come with, driving in the winter or, fire conditions, things like that. So
Sure.
Talk about the beat in itself and what areas where do you find yourself the most?
Usually Murphy's or Arnold. From what I've at least realized, it's our most populated areas in that part of the county.
Mm-hmm.
So I mainly put a lot more focus onto them. I try to make my rounds throughout that entire beat as much as best as possible, but considering I have a higher density of population in those two areas, I try to put more focus into those areas just to make sure my presence is a little bit more known.
All right, that makes sense. Specifically with Murphy's and the upcoming vacation season, Arnold area, we're going to have a huge influx of tourists, weekends. There's the concert series out at Couch, so depending on what day it is, our county population can significantly
increase.
Yeah. So you're the only deputy from, we'll call it Murphy's to the county line.
Yep.
We run mutual aid with Alpine if they need it and vice versa. How many calls do you typically take a day?
Generally, a pretty good day, about 10, 12 calls, I'd say, about a day. That's also mixing a little bit of proactivity calls too with it also.
Well, explain proactivity calls to everybody.
So proactivity calls, we kind of mentioned it earlier on hotspot policing, like in talking about in briefing spots of the county that need a little bit more attention. Pretty much we'll take Murphy's Park, for example. A lot of foot traffic goes through there and whatnot. It's one of the areas that I'll go through throughout the day, and whether I do a foot patrol or an extra patrol, it's just to make sure that nothing's going on while I'm there or just me making a little bit more of an extra presence. And
that would also include like suspicious vehicle contacts or, traffic stops or suspicious person contacts or a lot of times on our graveyard shifts, the deputies will get out of their cars and, check door handles to make sure the doors are locked and on businesses or vacation homes and whatnot. So out of 10 to 12-ish calls a day, how many of those are reports?
Depends.
Depends?
Definitely depends. But I roughly would say on a good day, about 3 reports can come out of those calls, depending on what the situation is. But it really does depend on what I'm dealing with.
And the reports are something that requires you to document in a written form of what happened, the witness statements, the suspect statements, any evidence gathered, things of that nature,
Sure.
or just an information report in case something does happen later on.
Yep.
How long? So let's say a basic report, and there's nothing basic about a report.
No.
But how long would you say a general call for service non-arrest report would be?
So for non-arrest, just general report, we'll take a vandalism report, for example. We meet with the person who called it in. Usually they're most of the time also the victim too. Gather their statement, get a time frame of when it occurred, get the cost of damages, get pictures, and after getting all that put together and typed up, it generally could take hour and a half, maybe, I'd say, making sure that it all looks good and pretty before you submit it and it gets approved.
So 3 of those a day, and then that's not including any significant reports like a domestic violence or an arrest where specifically in the Arnold area or your beat, we'll call it the Charles beat,
Yep.
Having to drive that person all the way down to the county jail
Yep.
and go through the booking process, filling out that paperwork, booking whatever evidence you have, and then driving back. So an arrest can take a big chunk out of your day.
Yep.
So in addition to, we talked about when you're not taking calls for service, you're doing the hotspot policing, you're doing the extra patrols. Can you explain a little bit about the community-oriented policing or the problem-oriented policing? I know the problem-oriented policing is very similar to hotspot, but the cops-pops process?
Sure. So the cops pops process with community-oriented policing, it's pretty much us as a department going out within our community and hearing what their concerns are and what we could be doing better when we're out there on the street and when they see us and whatnot. So it's having a better connection with the community and hearing their voices on what we could be doing to improve their quality of life.
And that's really one of the harder things to get across to some newer deputies, where what works in a particular area, like let's say what works in Murphy's, doesn't necessarily work somewhere else, and getting to know what issues the specific citizens of that area want, so we don't have a one size fits all for the whole county or just a one size fits all for every situation, the cookie cutter, and giving it that individual approaches. It's why we put specific deputies in the same beat for long periods of time, so they can get to know their beats. Have you had any community-oriented policing issues?
Not necessarily. Usually I have talked with a few of the community members with some of the cases I've least worked, and I take into consideration some of the things that I'm told and whatnot when it comes to when I do my extra patrols, like let's say out in Murphy's and whatnot. I pay a little bit more attention in regards with that, and anytime I am voiced a concern, I try to spread the word of any other deputy that may be in the area just so that they're aware of it too. So I like to make sure that just if there is a complaint or maybe there's a concern that someone thinks that should be checked out, I like to make sure my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed.
Okay. So you're out taking calls, you're writing reports as needed, you're booking evidence, making arrests as needed. About how many, and this is just ballpark, out of a week, how many arrests do you think you make?
Varies every week. It's different every week. Some weeks you can have up to 6 arrests. I know you're having 1, 2 almost every single day. And then there's sometimes where just, everyone decides to, I guess, be on their best behavior and you don't get anything. But generally speaking, I mean, on average, per squad, I guess when I say squad, I mean the other day shift too. I'd say maybe about an arrest or 2 or a week, I guess altogether would be a bit of an average, but it definitely depends.
So do you buy into the old adage that when it's a full moon, we have more arrests or things are crazier?
I definitely have become a lot more superstitious with this job. That's for sure.
Yeah, deputies are very superstitious. There's you don't say the Q word.
Yep, don't say that one.
Which is, we don't say that, and there is something to do with the lunar cycle. So I know you've only been on a year and a half, but you do have some experience as a explorer. What do you find most rewarding about your work as a deputy?
Knowing that I'm going out and helping someone. That was I mean, that's just been a goal I've had in my entire life, is being able to just do my best, give 110%, and be able to know that I help someone at the end of the day. That's the most rewarding part about this job.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that probably would go into it for the money, but you can't have that attitude. Like, you got to be able to want to do this and be able to help people. And that's like my biggest thing.
Yeah, there's some things in this job that you couldn't pay people enough to do unless it was a calling, and it sounds like that's exactly what you have as, you know, at a very early age, is a calling, and the wanting to help someone, and that takes many different forms, depending on, you know, again, the call for service, and that can also be very difficult because not many people call us, you know, specifically 911, telling us we're having a great day.
Yep.
Will you send a deputy by so I can share that? So, you know, having some of that baggage, if you will, you know, carrying with you some of the, or a lot of the negativity, or could be constant negativity, can be a little taxing. You know, what do you do to handle a high risk or stressful situations? What do you do to help with that?
So I found personally just being able to talk about it and share it with others, it helps me be able to process it and deal with it in my own head, because it never helps to bottle it up. It helps that our department, we have something that's called like a peer support program. So we have people that are dedicated within the department. If you need someone to talk to about a stressful situation or an incident that just occurred, they're there to listen, and they are there to hear your concerns, whether or not you have. And I feel that's pretty beneficial in regards with, I mean, just the things that we have to deal with in law enforcement as a whole. I know we have some county resources too when it comes to making sure that our mental well-being is also good too. And just like earlier when I was going over like my hobbies and stuff, just outside of work, not work related, I find hunting, fishing, and just, you know, being outdoors, being able to clear my head and not have to think about anything definitely keeps me on the right track. Keeps me straight and narrow. Yeah,
nature can certainly be a healing force, you know, especially when you need to go out and, you know, just let that negativity or the baggage go, and making sure it doesn't follow you, you know, throughout your career, or even, you know, follow you home.
Yep.
So, talked a little bit about what you find most rewarding. What's some of your biggest challenges for law enforcement?
I would say the biggest one that just always comes to mind is being able to balance the being at work and then going home at the end of the day. Me personally, I struggle to turn off work mode. Probably a workaholic. That's probably one way to put it. I like being at work, like doing what I do, but then when I get home, it's sometimes hard to turn that button off and just start relaxing, and then honestly be ready for the next day, because that's the whole point. But being able to find that happy balance is probably the most challenging part for me.
Yeah, and, you know, being on an on-call team, when the crisis response unit, like the CNT, you know, that phone can ring at any time.
Yep.
And you have to be ready to respond, you know, stop personal projects that you're working on, you know, cancel hunting trips, cancel fishing trips, cancel birthdays, that kind of stuff. It just, you know, things happen, and our lives as deputies change at a moment's notice to go, you know, go to the emergency that's evolving. And I've noticed a little bit, you know, it can be, you said, having a hard time turning it off. You know, for law enforcement, at least my perspective is, you know, it's hard for deputies, specifically newer deputies, to go from, like you talked about earlier, it could be a vandalism where, you know, not a whole, you know, real risk of threat to life to yourself or getting hurt, going from that straight into, you know, serious domestic violence where, you know, they're on scene and, you know, somebody's getting victimized. Yep. Leaving that, going to, you know, talking to somebody about illegal parking, and switching gears to, you know, literally never knowing what's coming next, and never knowing that even if it's it's just a barking dog call, there's no such thing as a routine call. Nope. And having that, I don't want to call it on edge, but the elevated alert, it's really hard to turn off when you get home.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you said it perfectly. I mean, going back and forth, I mean, you could have just a call where it's as simple as just a parking to, like you said, a very high stressful domestic violence. And that can happen at a moment's notice and without even to think about it. So it definitely factors in always being elevated.
Yeah, that makes it a little difficult. I know you've only been on a year and a half, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Any memorable experiences you've had in the field?
For a year and a half, I got a good list going, that's for sure. Definitely have a good list. But I guess one that just sticks out in particular to me, I think it was back July. I want to say it was back last year, July, towards the end of the month. And it was for a welfare check / 5150 call, which a 5150, it's someone having a mental health crisis.
Could be a danger to themselves or
Could be a
others.
danger to himself and others. So I was responding out. I've had contact with this lady before. Already kind of knew her routine and what was going to be going on and whatnot. I already kind of had somewhat of a rapport with her. So it was just a matter of going there and talking her through the process and seeing what was going on. And get there, like I said, pretty standard interaction that I've had with this individual before. So it wasn't anything too new for me. But her husband at the time, I've also had contacts with him before, but it was a little different this time around. I don't know how to really describe it, but you get a gut feeling. Just something didn't seem right. Just he wasn't acting normal as he usually would, as I've contacted him in the past. But wasn't there for him at the time, so I wasn't thinking too much about him at the time. And on top of that, he left with the caregiver soon after I had arrived and started talking with her. So was there for about almost 3-4 hours. Still nothing going on. Pretty much just trying to talk her down, try to calm her down and getting her set with other resources the county offers. And the husband comes back and he even acts even more odd. And the county resource that I had called out for to have the lady be evaluated, she decided to evaluate the husband too. So I was sitting with the person I was there for, and about 10 minutes goes by and the county worker comes back out and she tells me, yeah, no, he needs to go too. And I'm just confused because it seemed like he was just going to be going and taking a nap. That's what my understanding was.
Right.
And he comes bolting out of the door and runs to the car. And I'm just having to think quick, okay, well, if I didn't think he seemed right, she didn't think he seemed right, okay, I got to stop him from leaving. So went out to him. He had started the car and everything. And he told me, hey, I'm going to be getting out here. I'm like, hey, do you get a license? I just want to make sure before you get out of here, I just want to make sure you're licensed and whatnot. Oh, no. Lost it since my wife, since she took my wallet. It was kind of what the whole ordeal was about. I'm like, okay, well, if you can call the caregiver back, have her come and give you a ride since it seems like she's able to drive and she just dropped you off. He tells me, oh yeah, I have her phone number in the bedroom. Okay, sweet. Goes back inside and I'm outside talking with the park manager for a little bit. And out of nowhere, I start hearing screaming coming from inside. And generally, the lady that I've come out and contacted, she has random outbursts sometimes, so I didn't think too much of it at the time. But this whole gut feeling I've had this entire call, I was throwing me off. So something told me to go back inside and went back inside. And sure enough, it was the county worker talking with this lady, and she was screaming and whatnot. But when I looked to the husband's bedroom, and he barely had his door open, like you can barely see through it. And I started noticing that he was throwing knives on the bed and it started making me kind of throwing me out of my OODA loop. I was like, okay, well, maybe he's got it hidden somewhere. And out of nowhere, right when I'm about to say something, he throws the door open, comes out, and he has a knife to his throat. And in the middle of me and him, there's the county worker and his wife are just sitting there. And I'm just like, okay. Went from 0 to 100 really quick. And he was telling me that he wanted to kill himself, that he just couldn't take it anymore. So at that point, just because of the fact of how close I was and I didn't know what could have happened, and I'm always trained that things can go from 0 to 1,000 real quick when it comes to any type of weapon. I had the county worker get behind me. I unholstered my sidearm and was just trying to talk him down, like, hey, you don't want to do this, like trying to just reassure him and reassure that he just needed some help. And he kept walking closer and closer to me. And eventually it went from the knife being at his throat to it being pointed at me and the county worker. And I still think about it to this day. Like, it really kicked in reality of what this job really entails. I already had a feeling of what it was before, but having that moment of having my firearm pointed at someone and then having them approach me with a knife, it was a really eye-opening reality check, which thankfully after telling him, hey, drop the knife, he eventually did and was able to comply and was able to get him detained and whatnot, called for some other units in. After getting some things sorted out, we were able to get him on a 5150 hold, which is crazy to me because the fact that I was there for his wife and didn't even do anything with the wife at the end of the day, it ended up being the husband, just shows you how things can go 180 even quickly on a call too, from 0 to 100 to the person who's calling in is the one that ends up getting either taken or arrested. You never know with this job. It really is crazy.
I bet you're pretty glad to have that communications degree that day.
Yeah, very much so. Very, very much so.
Yeah, unpacking what you talked about a little bit is, having that, going in with one expectation and watching things unfold and having that relationship with them of this is not how they typically act.
Yep.
And just having that something's going on, and just having that heightened sense of awareness, not work in the same area twice, you wouldn't know that something was out of place, and you wouldn't know, be a little more on guard. And you mentioned something earlier. You mentioned the OODA loop, which is not a, new cereal. It's a term used by people to talk about the orientation and decision-making process where, your decision-making and observation is interrupted, causing you to, re-engage and reevaluate. So having that break in decision-making kind of in other words, I was taken aback.
Yep.
Or I had to, take a second look, something to that effect.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we talked about. Like, you go from that call where somebody's pointing a knife at himself, the wife's possibly in harm's way. Certainly you are, certainly the person is, going from that and having to, not necessarily have the time to unpack that or deal with that, because you might probably have another call pending when you're done with this. Just making sure that you have that decompression time, like you were talking about, getting home. After that, that's probably not a day you're going to unwind real quick. No. That's one of those ones you're going to want to, keep track of and make sure you, like you talked about earlier, maybe go get some peer support. And, peer support has certainly gotten a better reputation as far as it's not the one magnanimous event where, like an officer-involved shooting that could cause somebody to want to talk about it. It could be, a small incident or accumulation of a lot of little incidents over time. And certainly that incident was, something that that's one of those ones you're probably going to remember for a very long time.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about life as a deputy, calls for service, the rewarding part. Talked a little bit about briefing. I forgot. I'll do a little go back. How do you stay up to date, with the changes in laws? Is that like during briefing? What do you guys talk about during law changes?
So when it comes to law changes, it's mainly just different case laws, maybe different penal codes that are introduced with new elections. For example, we could take the Prop 36 that just went into effect. Pretty much we've been talking about a lot about that recently in briefings, just in what we can and can't do when it comes to thefts and when it comes to drug charges. It's definitely been a nice tool to be able to use now, but pretty much we can go over like stuff like that and how we can go about certain cases and how we can apply that to the job.
And our office also has what we call Lexipol or daily briefing. What is that all about?
So Lexipol, it's an online system that our department uses where it allows us to have a digital manual of our department policies and whatnot, and also keeps us up to date by having us do like daily training bulletins where it gives us a scenario for a certain policy and then gives us like a question that we have to answer at the end of it. So keeps us brushed up on everything updated.
Kind of takes the policy into the real world of how to apply it in certain situations. So we talked about calls for service and what technology or tools do you find most helpful?
Well, I can definitely say a GPS, that's for sure, since I'm not from around here. But in all honesty, it actually wasn't too bad when I first started working here to pick up the county. As long as I knew my main highways, it wasn't too bad to get around. But definitely GPS helps. Our computer that we have in our patrol vehicles, it's called an MDT, allows us to be able to see an incident that maybe dispatch had created for us for a call for service that we're going to be going to. If we need to look up a license plate, if we need to look up a certain person, we can get all their history from right there. Definitely a game changer having that. And body cameras. Body cameras have worked wonders because, I mean, let's say that you can't remember something that you're on scene from the notes that you were taking. You can go back, refer to your body camera, and pretty much be able to put the pieces together and what you had for that call. So,
yeah, especially during high stress events, our minds and our hearing and sight can only take in so much.
Yep.
There might be something on the body camera that you were engaged, you were looking, you just due to the stress of the situation you didn't see or you remembered it there was 2 feet instead of a foot and a half or something to that
Absolutely.
effect.
No, definitely, absolutely. In the academy, they told us about what's called tunnel vision in high stress situations where you're just so hyper focused on that one thing at the time that everything else that also is surrounded for the case can just be totally ignored. So that's why the body cam just completely helps with that.
Yeah, it's hard, or maybe some people may not realize, but it's 2025, but our bodies sometimes react like we're cavemen.
Yep.
When that high stress situation hits and you have that adrenaline dump and your eyes dilate and the blood vessels change and your body has a physical reaction, having that dump where you're just, somebody's holding a knife, literally.
Yep.
Somebody's holding a knife at you, and it's going to be possibly a life-changing situation. That physically changes how you perceive things.
Yeah.
And then having that lack of that adrenaline, or that adrenaline, you're coming down off of that and having that, extreme low, and, dealing with all the physical situations that arise out of that. And then having to, if that happens 3 or 4 times a day, or even, 5, 6, 10 times a week, Calaveras isn't immune to some of the high risk situations that other agencies are. So just, being aware of that, and, having that mindfulness of how do I help this, or how do I help myself? So I'm sure you learned a lot of lessons from that person that was wielding a knife with you.
Yep.
What's the most important lessons you've learned during your time in this profession other than that?
I'd say people, not always emitting information, thinking that it could get them in a favorable light with us and whatnot. And
Explain that.
well, in a bit simpler terms, if when I'm getting a statement from someone and they're lying to me, maybe possibly about the situation and whatnot of what really took place. So to think that it would possibly benefit them more, but in reality, it just makes our job harder when we're just trying to solve the puzzles the way I like to look at it at the end of the day, and be able to satisfy everyone's needs and go home at the end of the day. That's definitely one. Never being complacent. From that just experience alone with the knife, just proved my point even more, is that you never want to become complacent, in the sense of anything could happen. It can go from a 0 to 1,000 instantaneously without even you thinking about it. Even if you think you know the people and you've been out on plenty of calls with them, just things can change. You never know. Definitely complacency. Complacency can kill if you're not aware of it.
Yeah, go back to the omitting information. Do you have a specific example? Obviously don't use names or whatnot. Do you have a specific example of something to that effect? I know it's oftentimes, for me or in other law enforcement officers, it's one of those things where there's lack of a better term, there's a he said, she said, and their stories generally go the same way.
Yep.
They're picture a road. You're generally going down the road at the same time. One of them veers off on an off ramp before the other one does, and that's where everybody. Well, were you drinking? Well, I didn't have anything to drink. Yep. But then there's clear evidence that they're drinking. This is just a for instance. Well, why would you tell me that you weren't drinking? It's not a big deal. You're not drunk.
Right.
I was just, somebody said they saw you drinking.
Sure.
And then now it's like you have this whole thing in the back of your head of, well, why would you leave that out?
Yeah.
If you left that out, or you painted that to look better, what else did you leave out?
Exactly. I had, just because of the fact I'm on call right now, just had a call for service where we were going out to some people that were reported to be shooting out on some private property. We get there and they tell us, no, we weren't shooting, but we have targets, paper targets literally set up with a bullseye on it. We have a couple cans and they have clearly been shot. It's like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, why are you lying to me? Like, it's right there.
Yeah. And law enforcement being as they are, if you're lying about this, then what's really going on?
Exactly.
But yeah, just, escalating it to somewhere it doesn't need to be. Maybe just, I was getting ready to shoot. I didn't realize private property, or oops, sorry,
And generally that's all it is. It's just like, hey, whoops, didn't know. Just for example, with the private property one, it's like, hey, didn't know. And usually those outcomes, it's just a matter of educating someone, giving them the right resources so that they're more aware of it at the next time, so that it doesn't happen again. It's again all about solving the problem.
Yeah, and having that awareness as a deputy, specifically a new deputy, which seems like you have it pretty well. Of, hey, I'm not trying to take you to jail.
Yeah,
not every answer is an arrest and taking them to jail and putting them back in the car. It's just like you said, it's education. Like, don't do this.
Yep.
Stop it.
Simple as that sometimes.
Yeah. But then, it could take a different turn if, we go down different roads.
Yep.
I realize you just have a year and a half on. What are some misconceptions about law enforcement that you had? I know it's a little different because you had a behind-the-scenes look as an explorer, but what are some misconceptions that you think the public has about law enforcement that you'd like to dispel?
Definitely just going to use an example. Everyone, when they think law enforcement, they think of the TV show Cops. It's always running and gunning, going into the next chase, going into the next pursuit, which, to be fair, there are a lot of times where there's days where it's just call after call after call, and you don't have enough time to be proactive, go do traffic stops, go find people that are wanted and whatnot. Those days are fun, but there's a lot of days where it's not that high intensity excitement that you're always getting. It's just some days it can be a burglary after burglary after burglary. And what I mean by that is cold ones where they're from the past and now they're just being found out about. It's not an active one, but some days it's just doing that over and over again. It could be vandalism one day. It could be people parking in the wrong spot another day. Definitely a big misconception on that one. And mainly another one being report writing. I don't think when people come into this career, I don't think they realize how much writing goes into this career. Just how early we were talking about, it could usually take an hour and a half to, I know the longest I've spent on a report, maybe 6 hours. And that was for a child abuse case that I had. So it definitely entails a lot of writing. So if you don't like writing, maybe practice a little bit with it.
So that child abuse case, if you can remember, about how many pages was that?
7, 8 pages.
So conservatively, we'll call it seven typed pages, because we don't write reports. It's a general term, but we type reports.
Yep.
So 7 typed pages of a child abuse that, just to talk about our process a little bit, you write it.
Yep.
It goes to a sergeant or corporal for review to make sure all the elements were there like we talked about. They approve it.
Yep.
And then that goes over to the district attorney's office, or if there's more follow-up investigation, it goes what we call upstairs or to our investigation division. They will do additional follow-up. So that one child abuse case, before even an arrest is made, or if an arrest is made, could have upwards of 20 pages of observations of the deputies and investigators before the district attorney gets a hold of it, and they do possibly their own follow-up investigation or more in-depth investigation or interviews or, forensic interviews. So, 6 pages, and that's not unheard of. That's fairly...
That for most big cases, that's pretty standard, if not more. It just really depends on what you have. But it's pretty normal to have pretty long reports like that for a good chunk of time.
And the better you document, so that the report is meant to document what happened and preserve the evidence that we found and explain it and basically capture the essence of the event. The better you do that, the more likely you can recall what happened later on if you go to the stand, and the more it sets up our detectives, or again our district attorney's office, for filing appropriate charges or making sure those charges are seen through and they're adjudicated to properly.
Right, and the whole idea with the report is that it helps you, like you said later on when you go to stand, that it recollects your memory. So the more detailed that you make it, the better it is for you at the end of the day.
Exactly. So where do you see yourself in 5, 10, or 15 years?
Here, that's for sure. I can definitely see myself here, but be a little bit more specific. For the longest time, ever since I wanted to be in law enforcement, I wanted to be in detectives. So eventually promoting, once I definitely got a little bit more time under my belt and I feel a little bit more prepared, I definitely will be able to go up and do our investigations, which is upstairs, like we said earlier, and do detective work, because I really like digging deep, really like trying to solve the puzzle, and I feel that would just be the place to be able to do it.
And if you thought, or if you think that deputies write a lot of reports, that is all
That's all.
I shouldn't say that. That's not actually accurate. That detectives have a significantly higher proportion of writing to driving around and making arrests. So, been on a year and a half, C&T, looking to be an explorer. Anything else that you're looking forward to, or anything that you thought was different as it relates to a day in the life of a Calaveras County Deputy Sheriff?
I definitely want to try to be a little bit more hands-on with the recruiting. Most of the pellet bees that we've had ever since I've started, I've attended almost every single one of them because I want to be able to, kind of like the same situation with the Explorer program, I want to be able to be that leading hand for the next generation that comes after me.
So if people aren't familiar, the pellet bee is it's a testing process where it's a twofold. It's a physical agility test, body drag, jumping over a couple walls, a short obstacle course, things of that nature. And then there's also a written portion, and that we host those about every other month at our office, and that's the initial selection phase before becoming a deputy, and then it goes into the interview process. And if you've passed that, then you go into the background. If you pass that, you go into some other selections, the background, medical, and then you go into the academy. So from hiring a deputy, from the time they put effort into doing the pellet B all the way through the academy could be, academy 6 months. The selection process could be equally, 4 months at least with the background and everything. So it's almost a year and a half from the time a deputy or a person says, I want to be deputy, through the FTO program to hit the street, which, a small agency like Calaveras, that waiting for 2 deputies to get through the process or 3 deputies to get through the process and become, solo deputies can be, an eternity when we're running a little short. So what advice, speaking of being a recruiter, all right, let's put you on the spot again. You're doing pretty good at that. So what advice would you give somebody that's considering a career in law enforcement? What would you tell them?
One of the biggest things that I tell anytime I have a ride-along or whenever I go and visit at my academy that I went to, we go and see some of the new recruits that we've hired on, I always tell people that you want to have to do this job. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the mindset or the will to get down and dirty and get business done at the end of the day when it comes to this career, you won't make it far. You got to want to do it. That's the biggest thing. Understanding that you're going to have a lot of time away from home. You're going to miss holidays because we have to work holidays sometimes. It's the reality of it. The shift work, sometimes 12 hours a day could be tolling on some. And just because of the fact of the line of work that we're in, a lot of dangerous things come with it, so the risk of injury. So just being in that mindset of understanding those things definitely will help you too. Do your homework. Definitely do your homework. Make sure you're brushed up on your penal codes, vehicle codes, case law, and whatnot. At least the basics, just so you are aware of how to do the job at a base level. And the main thing that I always try to encourage people whenever they come to the pellet B or if I go to an academy, I tell them to just sign up for a ride-along. Just tag along one day, talk with our admin sergeant, and they'll get you set up on a day, and we'll take you along and show you how the day, pretty much how our day-to-day goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the last part that you mentioned, that the ride along and doing your homework, just making sure that the agency that you go to, if you want to do a lot of traffic and do accidents, maybe Calaveras isn't the place for you, but maybe CHP or a municipality. Yeah. If you want to do, focus on, wildlife laws, maybe Fish and Game is the best place for you. But if you want to be in a rural setting, a place like Calaveras certainly could be a good fit. But if you're somebody that doesn't like the outdoors or doesn't want to drive in the snow, or those kind of things, maybe again, a municipality would suit you better. Which nothing wrong with that, but making sure the effort you put into finding a place pays dividends, so you can stay there or have more enjoyment. I think you get some really, really good advice. Anything else before we start wrapping this up?
Not really too much to pick with my brain because I still got a lot of time left. So that's for sure. Still got plenty more to learn. Well,
you must be doing a good job. You're already on a special team. And when we discussed who we were going to have on the podcast to represent the day in the life of the deputies, you were picked unanimously by the sergeants that put you forward. So I don't know if they were sending you to sacrifice or they really had really think you were doing a good job, and I think it was the latter. You're doing a good job. So thank you for being here. Thank you for helping out our citizens.
Of course. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for your thoughtfulness that you put into the job. A lot of us live in the county, so knowing that, somebody that is thoughtful and thinks about the totality of, the community and how to serve, not just arrest. I have family and friends that live here, so, I certainly, take pride that, I'd be any deputy to show up and do a good job at a friend's house or, even my mom's house. That's a big concern for us, and, you're certainly carrying on the tradition. So nothing else?
Nothing else.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Calaveras Behind the Badge. We appreciate your engagement and hope you found the information valuable. Remember, your feedback and topic suggestions are always welcome as we strive to address the issues that matter most to our community. Stay safe, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.